Yesterday, Sayadaw explained about two meanings of Kilesa. The first meaning of Kilesa is torturing, tormenting, and second meaning is burning, scorching. When there is torturing of the defilements, there will be exhaustion, there will not be any rest. And when one is scorched, burned by defilement, there will be no peace at all. When a fire burns something, it not only produces heat. When fire breaks out in the forest or in residential places, what happens to the things that are being burnt? One has to consider. Among the 10 kinds of defilements, if any one of the defilements burn the mind, when greed burns the mind, when anger, hatred, aversion burns the mind, and when delusion burns the mind, what will happen to the mind? Today, Sayadaw will discuss on what will happen to the mind if the mind is burned by any of the defilements. When things are burnt by fire, the things that are burnt are left dirty, ugly, and polluted. Before the fire breaks out, the things are in good condition. They can be of high quality, but after these things are burnt by fire, there will be a disaster. In the same way, when the defilements, raga, dosa, moha, lust, anger, hatred, aversion, delusion, burn, what will happen to one's life? Today, Sayadaw will discuss how one can extinguish the fires of raga, dosa, moha, which are disastrous. And Sayadaw will also explain how to weaken the defilement fire, how to uproot, how to extinguish the defilement fire. When things are burnt, there will be heat, burning heat. Burning heat is the immediate effect of fire. And let us look at the subsequent effects of fire. Kilesa, defilements, are the things that cause the being to reach. So what is the state that the being reach due to Kilesa defilement? Malina bhava, the state of being polluted. Kilesa defilement cause the being to reach the state of pollutedness, the state of pollution. When one has defilements, the person is degraded from the state of purity to the state of being polluted and degraded, and the person becomes inferior. When the defilements arise, the mind will be polluted and dirty, and also the person who possesses the mind associating with defilements will also become polluted and dirty, and the person becomes nihina bhava, the person becomes ugly, inferior, and degraded. Due to the defilements, lobha, dosa, moha, the beings reach the state of being polluted, inferior, and dirty, and ugly. Kilesa, defilements, are the things that are making one's life ugly and polluted. People, from the time they wake up from bed, they are meeting things to be seen, things to be heard, things to be smelled, things to be tasted, things to be touched, and things to be thought about. When one comes across desirable objects to be seen, there can be greed. And there can also be attachment, becoming extremely greedy, having lust when one comes across extremely pleasant objects. When this happens, there will be unwholesome mind associating with greed. Lobha mula citta, greed-rooted consciousness, will arise, and the mind is dirty and polluted, and thus his or her mind will become nihina, inferior. It will be more obvious when it is compared to the word ariya. Ariya is defined as parisuddha, meaning it is pure in every way. Ariya or parisuddha means being free from impurities and thus pure in every way. When one's physical, verbal, mental behavior are pure and clean, it will be uttama, it will be high and noble. But if one's body, speech and mind becomes polluted and impure, then it will be inferior and degraded. When there is purity, one will be high and noble, and if one is polluted and dirty in body, speech and mind, one will be inferior and degraded. If one is associating with greed, either the ordinary kind of greed or the extreme form of greed, when one will only be satisfied only when the person gets what she wants. If there is a lot of greed, then the mind will be dirty, polluted, and inferior. When the person wants to take things that she wants unlawfully, then his or her mind will be inferior. The mind will be overwhelmed by lobha, greed, and if the person indulges in greed, then the person will be inferior and degraded. Indulging in lobha, his or her mind will be associating with lobha. The person is said to be acquainted with lobha, and the person becomes a good friend of lobha, greed. Most of the people do not know that they should avoid, prevent the defilements. Most of the beings are not mindful. They do not know that they should prevent, cure, suppress, and uproot the defilements that has been following throughout the round of existences. Most of the beings do not know the way to prevent, suppress, uproot these defilements. Even though they may know the way to do it, but they do not practice enough in order to prevent, in order to suppress and uproot the defilements. Such kind of people, they are working for their own benefit, and they are being selfish for themselves as well as their family, their group, and so on. In this case, there will be extreme form of greed. There will be selfishness. When one indulges in greed, when one is overwhelmed by greed and indulges in greed, the person will do things that will make oneself suffer physically and mentally, and also the person will do things that make others suffer physically and mentally. So the person will be doing things that will make oneself as well as others suffer. If the person has not gotten into the stage of committing crime or offense, but even so, there will be suffering in the mind. The mind will be polluted. When the person gets to the stage of committing crime or offense, then there will be a lot of suffering. The person is hurting oneself as well as hurting others. When the person committing transgression by indulging in the defilements, the person does not know one's true benefit. The person does not know other people's true benefit. So the person does not know one's own benefit as well as other people's benefit. What it means by one's true benefit and welfare? The true benefit and welfare are the three trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, which make one's bodily behavior, verbal behavior, and mental behavior pure and clean. Sayadaw gives an example. If a person tries hard to earn, and if the person earns due to his or her effort, the person becomes wealthy, and the person will be well-to-do in life and will have good standard of life. In the same way, the person has to try hard in order to work for one's own benefit. One should practice Sila, Samadhi, Panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom, which are one's own true benefit, true welfare. If one indulges in lobha, greed, then the person does not understand one's own true benefit. By indulging in lobha, the person commits misconduct such as sexual misconduct, and the person can lie, deceive others in order to have personal gain, and the person also can take intoxicants, drugs, alcohol in order to have fun. If the person commits misconduct, then the person becomes inferior and degraded. Most of the people, they work, they do things in order to make one's business successful, and they do things in order to make one's own group business successful. When their business is successful, they may be wealthy, but their wealth has no guarantee. It can last only a certain time. What one should work for is one's moral conduct. One should practice Sila Samadhi Panya, which can bring the true benefit, true wealth. Usually, people are working for the kind of wealth that has no guarantee. And when they become wealthy, well-to-do, then they become intoxicated in their own wealth. And when they become even more wealthy, they become even more intoxicated with their wealth. If a person or if a group ruins one's wealth, then there will be anger and aversion. Or if one's property gets destroyed due to some circumstances, the person becomes depressed. The anger that arises when one's property has been destroyed by others, such kind of dosa is active kind of dosa. Being depressed when one encounters the loss of property due to circumstances, there can be passive form of dosa. When one has anger and aversion towards person or a group which destroy one's property, then the person does not want the welfare of the destroyer, and thus the person will lack metta, loving kindness. The person who lacks metta will not have any patience or forgiveness when dealing with others, and the person is reluctant to make sacrifices. There can also be lack of compassion. When one lacks metta, loving kindness, there will be anger, hatred. And when one lacks karuna, compassion, there will be cruelty. When one indulges in cruelty, the person commits misconduct, tormenting, torturing, killing others. There can also be envy and jealousy. The person lie, deceive others in order to destroy other people's property. Such kind of things arise due to dosa, anger, and there will be dosa mula citta, anger-rooted consciousness, and the person become inferior, polluted, and degraded. What is causing the mind and the person to be polluted and inferior? It is the defilements which are causing the person to be polluted, inferior, and degraded. There can be ordinary form of lobha. And when lobha, greed, becomes excessive, there can be selfishness for oneself. Anger can be in the form of depression, grudge, and it can also lead the person to be degraded and inferior. Not knowing that the defilements can make the person degraded and inferior, it is moha, delusion. In other words, it is called avijja, ignorance. When there is moha, delusion, one does not know the flaws, the faults of defilement, but instead the person takes pride of it. Having delusion, one does not think that defilements are degrading and inferior, but instead the person thinks of them as good, and the person takes pride in his or her defilement. It is delusion, and the mind will be associated with delusion. It is unwholesome mind, which is also inferior and degrading. Among the 10 kinds of Kilesa, defilements, lobha, dosa, moha, greed, anger, and delusion are Kilesa, fire, and they are burning all the time, and they are burning. For the people who do not know that they should control their body, speech, and mind, the person who let one's body, speech, and mind free, in such kind of people, the defilement fire will be burning a lot, and such kind of fire are difficult to be extinguished. Such kind of fire are breaking out, they are burning within oneself. There are also other defilements, such as mana, conceit. One holds high esteem of oneself, such as I am officer, I am businessman, I am the boss, and so on. And there can also be conceit, thinking that he and I are equal. So there can be equality conceit. Even though the person may be lower than other people, such kind of person can also have hina mana, inferiority conceit. So in this way, there are 3 types of conceit. Not knowing that lobha, dosa, moha are the cause of suffering, not knowing the immediate results or the subsequent results of defilements, it is delusion. And there can also be uncertainty and doubt about the practice that can lead the person to be high and noble. Not knowing that good deeds can make the person high and noble, there can be uncertainty and doubt. There can also be delusion, not knowing that there are methods to remove the impurities in order to be high and noble. When the person is practicing wholesome deeds, when the person is practicing in order to develop the mind and the knowledge, the person does not want to exert effort, there can be laziness, flinching away from the practice. Laziness is also one of the defilements. There can also be uddaca, restlessness, when the mind becomes distracted. Lack of moral shame and lack of moral fear are also defilements. Lack of moral shame from wrongdoing, lack of moral fear from wrongdoings are also defilements. When one lacks moral shame and moral fear from wrongdoing, then the person daringly, ruthlessly commits wrongdoing. Such things are rooted in lobha, dosa, moha. And due to lobha, dosa, moha, there can be also other defilements and misconduct arising. Ordinary people are wasting their time with Kilesa defilements. Ordinary beings are having companionship of Kilesa defilements, and they are wasting their whole time with Kilesa defilements all day long apart from sleeping hours. In brief, lobha, dosa, moha are the major defilements, and also other defilements, they are bad in their own way. Among the defilements, the last ones, ahirika and anuttapa, lack of moral shame and lack of moral fear, are very bad. Ahirika, not having moral shame from wrongdoings. Anuttapa, lack of moral fear from wrongdoings. These two are called kasna, meaning they are dark, they are black or dark things. So the example is given here. Black color absorbs heat. In the same way, so long as there are dark things, ahirika and anuttapa, lack of moral shame and lack of moral fear, there will be absorption of all the other defilements. The presence of ahirika and anuttapa, all the other defilements will be absorbed, and thus there will be burning and suffering. So long as one is not free from ahirika and anuttapa, one will be absorbing the defilements, and thus there will be suffering. That's why ahirika and anuttapa are things that are very frightening, because they absorb the heat, they absorb the other defilements. If one lacks moral shame and moral fear, then the person cannot control one's life. Lack of control, one's life will not be pure, clean, or high. When one has lack of fear and lack of moral shame and moral fear, the person will not shine with moral conduct. And one will be having Karna Dhamma, which are Ahirika and Anuttappa. When one has Ahirika and Anuttappa, one will not have Lokapala Dhamma, the guardian of the world. And lacking Deva Dhamma, lacking the state that keeps oneself shine with moral conduct, the person will be greatly inferior and degraded. Lack of prudence, one does not know the truth, one does not have shame or fear from wrongdoing, and the person ruthlessly perform wrong things by body, speech, and mind. And Saraji will continue to explain tomorrow. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.